Welcome back to the Elevate Your Best podcast. My name is Michael Danklefs.
And I'm Bruno Martins. And today we are going to talk about feelings of being overwhelmed.
So, especially with what's going on in the world in the last 2 weeks, let alone the last 2 years, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed by what is going on or what is not going on. The things that we want to be doing that we're not getting to, or that there's too much to do and we don't know where to start.
And just so people know, if you're watching this on the future, the war just started. Russia invaded Ukraine recently in the past weeks, and we are on the verges of getting out from the COVID pandemic. We don't know exactly how much it's going to take, but it's been 2 years that COVID struck, COVID-19.
Yeah, so needless to say, it's been an interesting couple of years. And we really wanted to focus on this, especially since this is in the emotional month for the life book cycles. So March, we then do a deep dive on emotions. What are the recipes we want to recreate in our lives, and what are the recipes we want to actually put aside and actually no longer do? And overwhelm, I think, is where I see so many people getting stuck because, like I said, either that they don't know where to start. It tends to be because they don't know where to start. Either they have too many options or they don't feel like they have any. I think it is a really common feeling in our society globally with the number of ways that people can connect digitally if you're actually in that space, or you're stuck in a place where you can't figure out how to get out. And I think it takes a lot of, I would say, soul searching, vision casting to really figure out where is it that you want to go and why do you want to go there. So we're going to be touching on a couple pieces of that on why this is, such an important topic for us right now. And overwhelm is something that I do believe we can avoid. It's something that we can really take the opportunity to prepare for. It's when we've actually done our homework, when we have connected with where we want to go and using that as a filter for the next steps we're going to take. But it can, like this has a tendency to cripple us in a way where we are so stuck in our heads, where we're so stuck in our story and so stuck in our judgment of ourselves that we don't move forward, backwards, inside out, or upside down. So that's why this is so important for me to talk about right now, is that it's one of the many reasons why preparation is one of the core pillars of my coaching practice.
When you were speaking, Michael, you say it can be crippling. And one thing that came into my mind was that, yes, it can be crippling if we neglect the things that are overwhelming us. It can be crippling. And then I realized here in my head, like, oh, so overwhelming can also be associated with neglect. It's a lack of care. We just recorded before the podcast a new segment that we are going to call In My Experience, where I speak of what is being overwhelming in my experience in a short period of time, like 5 minutes. And then Michael spoke as well. And he spoke something about the thing about taking care of ourselves. Like you associated that. And I didn't got it the same way that I am understanding it right now. But now I'm seeing, like, of course, if we neglect things, if we don't take care, like when I said in my experience, if we don't finish things, it is taking care as well. We end up with a lot of unfinished things, a lot of sabotage in our lives, a lot of things that we just didn't take the time to take out of our lives or something like that. And this might lead us to feel overwhelmed. Yeah, as well.
Awesome. So really the two ways we want to look at this is, in some ways, how does it manifest in our lives? And then what can we do about it? I think that both are actually necessary, as the awareness as well as the response. And for me, it is, once again, coming back to me, the pillars in my coaching practice are there because I've needed them, because I have felt overwhelmed. So I have been to the point where it's okay, where do I go from here? It be either because it's a succession of failures or a succession of successes. That's okay. I've gotten this far, but I don't know where to branch off or turn around and go back. So this idea of overwhelm is something that I think that it's a human experience. I don't think that I have yet to run into a single person on the planet who has never felt overwhelmed. How do we manifest this in our lives is, we don't go anywhere because we're stuck where we're at, is really how this manifests. And I like what Bruno was talking about is when we don't complete things, they still take up space in our psyche, in our memory, in our mind. And it's like being that I'm a tech nerd, it relates to only having so much space in your hard disk to put things, or enough slots on your calendar to actually schedule things. So each time that one of the things that you've committed to isn't completed, the brain is still keeping tabs on it. It's still a running program there waiting for it to get completed, which is why, number one, the preparation phase is knowing what you're getting into. Commitment is, what does it look like to win? Accountability is tracking your progress towards that. And celebration is saying, this is done. I can now unload this program because I've crossed the finish line. And when we don't follow those phases, then we end up having all of these things that are just hanging out as zombie programs, as things that are waiting to get completed. And it really impacts our mindset. It impacts the way that we think about what is possible for us to do. Because, hey, I didn't complete those other 25 things. Why am I going to complete this?
And when you spoke about the capacity, the hard disk, the space on the computer, the processing limitations that it might have, the system might have. I remember the conversations I have with my family, my mother, and it's like this, Michael. It's like just what you just said. She is not moving forward in some aspects of her life, so she's stuck there feeling overwhelmed. And because she's feeling overwhelmed already, what happens is that she doesn't have a space to get way to process new information. So when we try to propose some new information, we try to discuss something, we try to analyze something, she's already overwhelmed. She says, I can't handle with this. And she lashes out. And she might say something that is too harsh or something like that, or she might just turn her back and I don't want to talk about it. And we tend to do that when we are feeling overwhelmed, particularly with the people that we love the most and we know the most that they will stay in our lives no matter what, because of the bond that is so strong. So we give license to ourselves to say, oh, this person will always be here. I'm going to be a little bit mean now. And with others that we might have the risk of losing that relationship, we'll take more care of that. So again, overwhelming relating to taking care of things. Seems like if we take care of things, if we take the time and give importance to the things, is a big step on getting better with these feelings of overwhelm.
Absolutely. And I think that overwhelm shows up differently for different people too. Like you said, for some, they get angry, they get upset, they get frustrated. Others actually turn that inward and they isolate themselves, they pull themselves away. They falls into that space of depression instead of, then I'm just going to give up. Because overwhelm is this point where there's so much to do that there's no way I can ever succeed, is where it can really get to, where it can really go to. So it's creating isolation regardless. Either you're pushing people away or you are walking away from situations, from places where you're going to be. And I like this idea of taking care, of investing in what is important to you in your life. Because otherwise, unless you're practicing at this, we then start making these rash, spontaneous decisions. We're actually like, it's not from this place of insight or intuition. It's a matter of reflex. It's a matter of fight or flight, where we're actually going to our baser emotions. And we do tend to then lash out and get, I wouldn't even say that it's a conscious thing at that point. We're actually getting more into kind of our baser nature of, well, I'm hurting. And it's actually in the 6 days meditation about around forgiveness, is the idea of hurt people. Is that if I'm hurting because I'm feeling so overwhelmed, or I'm feeling so downtrodden, or too much to do and not enough time to do it as a failure, then I'm more likely to be critical. I'm more likely to be almost to the point of being abusive if I don't feel like I can succeed. And I've been that person. I've been that identity where it's about anger and frustration because I wasn't taking care of the base things that I needed. And it also has led me to a point where I'm sabotaging the things that are important to me. So getting the exact opposite of what I'm looking to do, which is care for those things that are important to me, my family, my business, my home, ends up falling into disrepair, not paying bills, not spending quality time with the people I care about. And that is because I've fallen into this space of I've allowed too much things to accumulate, too much buildup in all of the categories of life, if it's emotional or physical or spiritual or intellectual, is that it gets to this place where I'm making decisions that are not only are they not in my best interest, they're not in other people's best interest either.
And you say something, Michael, about the moment of making decisions. I don't remember exactly how you say it, but it reminded me of Bruce Lee speaking about water, like be like water. Do you remember that? We can link that in the description. And it's a very nice talk. And it's interesting. I heard that talk a few times on the past, like several times, and it always comes back in my mind. And every time it comes back, I'm on a different perspective. I might see it with more value because he says that the water, when you put that on a teapot, it becomes a teapot. When you put that in a cup, it becomes the cup. And he says like, water can flow and water can clash, be water. And I constructed a lot of ideas on top of that, like water can flow, water can clash. It also can transbord. If you try to hold water and the water cannot go anywhere, the thing is that if we put more water, then it will transbord. Like even if the water cannot pass through an obstacle, if you add more content, if you grow, you will be able to overgrow and transbord that obstacle that is in front of us. We can do that. And the most interesting thing is that if we have this very dirty cup of water and you start putting water in, then the dirty water goes out and the new water that is coming in is the one that stays on the cup. So there's a lot of analogies on growth there. But what I was thinking was another idea that the water, I built this on top of this talk of Bruce Lee, is that the water, it will always flow through the path of least resistance. And we are on the same frequency. So if we are overwhelmed and we don't want to deal with things, or we are just trying to do something and we don't know what to do, and Michael said that we go down to the level of our mindset. How did you express, Michael?
It's getting into our baser reactions.
To our base reactions. And this is the water flowing through the path of least resistance. And as he said, many times those harsh decisions, spontaneous decisions on the moment, because we are overwhelmed, we don't know what to do, where to go, and we just flow on the path of least resistance. Actually, like you said at the end, Michael, they are not, many times they are not on our best interest, not in anyone's interest. They are not benefiting anyone. And if we are conscious and mindful, we can actually, we might take the time to prepare and act with more preparation, and then act in our best interest, improve our position. Instead of just reacting and doing things unconsciously, take the action. We can decide, analyze our scenario and decide to take the action that will improve us to a better position. I know it's not the time to talk about what we can do, but as those things are popping out in my head right now, as we talk on what is happening, I don't want to lose them. So I'm sharing them with you.
So I like this water idea because it sounded like you went up at one point to talk about that the water will then overwhelm you, because I think it will. In fact, I think that's in some cases where we see dams or levees are overwhelmed by the amount of force, the amount of water that's actually coming up against them. Water, this idea of water can actually be used for or against. It's this weird balancing act between having what you need in the quantities you need it, because too much of anything is a problem. Too much oxygen in the air, you actually become loopy and you no longer can function because you're over oxygenated. Same thing for too little. There's this balancing act in the middle. You can actually have too little money, and I think there's also this place of having too much. We've heard tons of stories of people who actually take their net worth to be get out of jail free card and literally do get out of jail free, and then there's this backlash for it. And I think that it's there's ways that we can approach this that I think is necessary for us to be able to then take the next step forward. And I wouldn't necessarily say that the idea of following this through, following this idea of overwhelm, we're not pushing this emotion aside. We're not, the term that I've heard is spiritual bypassing. It's not a matter of disowning this emotion of overwhelm. It's a matter of, if it's an emotion you don't want to experience, there are steps we can take in order to curb it, to lessen it, to be more prepared for the lesson that could come from it. So as we shift into what can we do about it?
Just one tiny note, Michael, is that, and we need to remember as well, that everything we do, we are a system. So we function in patterns, and everything we do, they repeat. When our feelings are overwhelming us, our emotions, and we don't know what to do, we feel all that struggle inside of us, and we follow those patterns of least resistance, it tends to, the more we feel like that, the more this will repeat in our lives. And it becomes a habit of self-sabotage. And this is something that it's very good to be mindful. Sometimes we are experiencing some problems. We might be feeling overwhelmed and not have no clue on what we can do, even after this conversation. So go after someone that can take and help you with a different perspective. Michael said in the beginning, sometimes the first time I actually think something, structure a thought, is because I'm helping somebody. So it helps me. This was in my experience, right, Michael? And it helps me understand this better. I feel the same thing. So sometimes that person might not even have solved that challenge we are experiencing in their lives, but when we present the challenge to them, they might have references that when facing that experience, they'll say, oh, we could do that. Take a look, go after somebody. It might be a coach, depending if it is a trauma about the past, might be a therapist, it might be both. And you can work both your past and your vision for the future. The thing is, if you're noticing that, and sometimes we don't even notice, we just experience overwhelming, take a look, see if there is not a pattern in which this is repeating. Take some notes. Remember, think on paper. If you feel overwhelmed, you might take a note, get a notebook, take some notes. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. When is the last time I felt like that? And when I did this exercise one of this day, I even remember mentioning on the podcast, it was on the same day, a few hours before. And I was like, I felt just like that, like I had the same struggle a few hours before. And then I realized how this pattern was recurrent and I could work on it. So remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a look. It might be a pattern in your life, and it might be good to invite someone to have a different perspective and help you figure out what is possible to do about it.
That's where I was going to go next with this. Is many times it is just rattling around it here, and unless you're really good and structured, you can't always see the patterns when it's in your head. So the first place that I wanted to go to when we get into this place of overwhelm, I've done this on several different occasions. I'm laying in bed and I just can't go to sleep because there's so much whizzing around in my head. Is get up, get a piece of paper, open up a document on your computer, something, open up your journal, and just do a brain dump. Get all the information out. If it's the list of the things that you need to get done, write your whole list out, and then you can prioritize those and actually then tackle them. But it's like I said before, it's all of those are like programs taking up space in your head. And when the resources are low, we don't tend to work nearly as efficiently or as well whenever all of it's actually solely stuck in our head. So we are really big supporters of this idea of, let's write this down, let's get this out of our head. Because it's, at least for me, yes, I'm pretty good at spatial relations and being able to see how things fit and connect together. It's amplified even more so whenever I actually take the ideas out of my head and I can manipulate it with my hands, or I can actually manipulate it with the computer and I can actually move things around. For me, that's the tool that helps me get beyond that overwhelm. So, as we're looking at how does this manifest, then we can then take it apart and then figure out what we can do about it. So for me, that first thing is take inventory. Inventory is part of the preparation phase. It's write it down. Let's get everything out on paper and potentially even get feedback from others on, especially if there's other stakeholders in what you're looking to accomplish, is get their feedback as well and get that written down so that everyone can actually see where everybody else lives with this, and it then becomes a conversation. So there's a couple of other things too that I think is really important for this. And it's one of the things that for me is where I like to play. It's the idea of being able to reframe things. Meaning is that if I actually see something from this perspective, and that's the only perspective I've taken on things, I'm going to see it in one particular way. If I'm actually up against a wall, all I can see is the wall that's right in front of me. But if I take a step back, I can see that there's a door over here and a window over there. But if I'm just nose to the wall, I can't go anywhere. So the same thing is true, I think, about even these ideas of overwhelm, these ideas of the failures actually having this negative impact on us. Is be open to the possibility that how you're seeing it right now may be purely based on the perspective you have at the time. And sometimes, like I said, it's taking a step back. Sometimes it's turning around and looking at the other side, literally looking behind you to see if there's actually another perspective we can gain from this. And when we're in this state of overwhelm, that becomes really difficult, because especially if we've run into that wall at full speed, all we can feel is the bricks on our face as we've just hit the wall. So sometimes we do, as Bruno was alluding to, is sometimes we need someone else to actually see the blind spots with us, not for us, but with us. That can be venting to a friend, that can actually be talking to a family member, that can be working with a coach, that can be working with a therapist. It could be going and talking to the lamppost. Sometimes that may be enough. When we verbalize it and put it out into the world, it's enough to actually take some of the charge off of it. Sometimes it gets us more riled up. But I think that this idea of actually getting it out of this cacophony of noise in our head allows us to then process it differently.
And it's very good for us to experiment with resignifying things. It's such a great power that we have. And sometimes we have experiences from there in our past, and they are, like Michael said on the past episode on, I believe it was the emotional month. How long will I allow a 6 years old to define how I behave? It was like that you said. And we can always resignify things. Our imagination is a great tool. Our work about the vision for the future that we create relates to our imagination. It's an exercise of imagination. And the same tool can be directed to our past and resignify many things that we are living. And right now, it's also important when we exercise that to understand that when we are conscious on the moment, we can decide on the moment what is the meaning we are giving to the experiences that we are having right now. And depending on this meaning that we are giving, it might be contributing for us to go to a overwhelmed position, a overwhelmed situation, or we might be recognizing what is it that is making us feel overwhelmed. And take a look on in the link in the description. There'll be two videos, short videos on in my experience where I share about feeling overwhelmed and Michael share his experiences as well. And take a look there because we talk about things that might be useful in this sense of recognizing what we are experiencing and working with that information to improve our position.
Also like what you touched on, I'm going to do a couple things here. So yes, the idea of looking at what meaning we've applied to something in the past, and does it still have that same meaning now? It's this idea of what are your beliefs? We talked about this on the Elevation Mindset Summit too. Is what are your beliefs about this thing? I think that's really important because we do apply meaning to things, to what we believe them to be, beliefs in ourselves, beliefs in the people around us, beliefs of a higher power, a connection amongst other people. Everyone has their own framework that they're working in. And sometimes those beliefs aren't serving us anymore. They may have worked when we were 6 or 12 or 25, but they may not be serving us anymore. So we won't have to. I'm gonna pull that back. You have an opportunity to reframe it, to renegotiate your agreement with that particular experience. In the same fashion that you have the opportunity to renegotiate a commitment if you're feeling overwhelmed because you're overcommitted, there's an opportunity to say, this is where I'm at. This is the belief I had. This is the belief where I want to get to, and start working towards that, which it's not a snap of the fingers thing. It is a choice. We get this opportunity to say, okay, this list of things that I have to do, these experiences that these emotions that I'm having right now, I can choose to be overwhelmed here. I can choose to put myself in a position in the future where I'll be overwhelmed again, and then choose our response. Now, in a space whenever there is mental illness here, I know, because I've experienced it, I've observed it, that there are times whenever that is a reaction based on how our brain is wired. So I don't want this just to be, hey, just choose and be flippant about it, because I know that there are times whenever our experiences have led us to this point where everything is overwhelming, and that's really what we need to find and engage in and be open to outside help. But where I really want to take the step to the left of that, you've gotten professional help where this is not overwhelmed based on, without any triggers, without any situational things going on, where you're just overwhelmed because you're overwhelmed. I want to honor the fact that you can get there. I've been there, but it's this space of, okay, I have these things laid out. I need to own the fact that my choices have brought me here to this situation where I have 6 people who need my time in the next 5 minutes. More than likely, that's because of choices that I've made in the last hour, the last day, the last week. That we can actually take a step forward into this by completing the things that we've done, by renegotiating with the people that we've actually committed to, or rethinking where exactly we want to go. Because, as I said before, sometimes no is the right answer, especially if you don't think that you are capable with the time and the resources you have at the time to follow through on that. That really is this, to me, that is when we talked about earlier in our podcast about being impeccable with your word is really important. Because if I say yes to something, I'm committing that I'm going to be there and complete that by that time frame. If it's not something that's in alignment with who I am or what I'm going to do, I feel it's better for me to be upfront and say, no, that doesn't work for me, rather than say yes and then sabotage myself while trying to deliver it. And I know that at least for me, that's where I have in the past tended to get overwhelmed is I would say yes to everything, even if I wanted to do it or not, even if I had a drive to do it or not, even if I thought it was the wrong thing to do based on the circumstances, I would still commit to doing it. And that's whenever I got the most overwhelmed. So there's this opportunity to say no, which is a full sentence. There doesn't need to be a justification. And sometimes that's where it needs to go, because as soon as we start justifying, then it's showing more of that overwhelm. It's actually expending more energy just to say this is done. And that kind of leads into the what are you committed to? And being mindful of what you're committing to based on where you're at and the resources you have in that moment.
And people of great success, what is Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha? Yes, Warren Buffett. He said that in some interview, he expressed that most of his success is not exactly thanks to the deals that he said yes. It's more related to the deals that the opportunities he said no. Because if he had many good opportunities in front of him, but if he wanted to put them all forward, he wouldn't be productive in anything. He wouldn't actually finish anything. And knowing exactly what were the opportunities to say yes was the major factor in his success, like saying no to many things, to most of the things that actually were presented to him. That's the idea that he communicated. Not this way, but he communicated this.
So it's one of the things that Keith Ferrazzi talks about too, is sometimes you need to recommit to what you're doing. And in doing so, you can then, in essence, release some of that pent up energy, is especially if it's tension among people, is getting clarity on something. So if I know that I'm not going to deliver on something, sometimes my overwhelm is that they're going to judge me because I didn't do what I said I'm going to do. And there's no way I can get this done. That can be something that I've actually experienced as well many times, is that me shutting down because I don't want to let them down. And in shutting down, I am guaranteeing I'm going to let them down. So there's also this idea of we're coming back into that impeccability, that being impeccable with your word, is saying what's on your mind and on your heart in that moment of, this is overwhelming for me. This is a challenge for me. This is my struggles. I need to renegotiate this. I need to ask for more assistance. I need to ask for more time. I need to ask for more resources. I need another referral that will help me get this done. And sometimes that can alleviate that tension and that pressure of overwhelm as well. And especially if it is something we've taken on that is more than we're capable of doing in that moment, other times it's that we need to find someone where that is an area of strength. If we realize that, wow, I'm no good at that. I'm not skilled at that enough in order to deliver it on the time frame that I expected. And that's where we can, like I said, ask for some help and support and assistance, so we can actually delegate that to someone else that is an area of their strength.
You spoke about resources, Michael, and it's a matter of resources. I have my project, The Sacred. It was called Cyber before, but that was a placeholder name. The thing is that I understand that I do not have all the resources necessary to launch this business. So I'm doing what I can do, like I'm creating this NFT collection. I'm going to put them out. People express them to be very pretty, aesthetically pleasing. For me, they could be so much better, but I don't have the resources. I partnered with an artist and he was doing an incredible work. It was fantastic, beautiful. But then the struggle to get this work done was too much. We spent entire year working together, and he just delivered 3 arts of 100. Of 100? No. And he just delivered 3 arts of 22 after 1 year. So there's another lesson there I'll share in a moment. So the thing is, but I understand, like, I can't, here's the second lesson. There's another lesson there. Sometimes we delegate because that's what I was going to say. We need to delegate things for people. And what do we choose to delegate? We choose to delegate our weaknesses. Some people, they'll focus on their weaknesses. Oh, if I only get better in this, if I don't know marketing, so I need to learn marketing. You need to understand, we need to understand what is supposed to be our strength. What am I good at? Have this comprehension of the self. What am I good at? Focus on your strength. Focus on what you wish to do. What brings joy to us? I believe in the last episode, Michael spoke about joy. So I don't know if it was in the networking call. We have a lot of conversations, but he was talking about bringing joy to the things that we do, bringing happiness to the things that we do. And that's when we actually enjoy the thing and we don't worry about what people will think and about a lot of things. We just get involved in that work and we actually flow in a lot of things because we are using a lot of triggers like curiosity, our interest in seeing the thing move forward. So we need to focus on that, because if we are focused on the weakness, we are always struggling. We will always be dealing with unfamiliar things, unfamiliar interfaces that we don't recognize. So they will be overwhelming to us. And we'll be always repeating the patterns of being overwhelmed. But the moment that we focus on our weakness, on our strength, but the moment that we focus on our strength, and then we get our weakness and say, hey, who is strong with that? And we trust that person. And it might be that you trusted someone because the guy that I partnered with, he was a great artist. His work was beautiful. Michael saw it. It's beautiful. And I was so excited about it. But then that it was not the right person because he had some qualities and he didn't have others. He was not delivering. He was not committed. He was not productive. So it would get to a point where the time would just, the window of opportunity would just not exist anymore. So it would be irrelevant to launch the NFT collection. So things will need to change. And another thing that I realize when people are in this situation, when they delegate something to someone, is that we overcommit. It talks about that, reevaluate our commitments as well. We overcommit. We say something like, take care of this work. And then that person is not delivering the way we expected or the way we agreed, or it's not just being worth it. Because the person might not deliver the way we expected, but then it's being worth it. But when it's not worth it, like in this case, I would lose the opportunity because 1 year passed, just 3 arts were delivered from 22 necessary. So, kid, you need to reevaluate the commitment and say, perhaps this person is not actually covering my weakness the way I intended. They bring another weakness that is even more exposed. So I sacrifice on the quality of the artwork of the project and put a lesser quality artwork that I did myself, but I did with so much care that people found it beautiful. It can be better, it can be greatly better, but I took care for it to be at least visually pleasing. So work on our strengths, recognize our weaknesses, because sometimes we don't delegate because we do not recognize that the weakness is there. Recognize the weakness and maintain the person that we delegate to accountable and committed, because we set the terms of our relationships. We set how things are going. And if things are not going the path that we intend to, we can put that person in check, maintain them accountable, and if they don't deliver, we can reevaluate our commitment to them, not be overcommitted. Know when it's the time to let the person go. Or like, I'm talking too much business-wise, but it might be in a parenting relationship with someone in our family. It might be in a romantic relationship. It might apply in several areas of our lives, even friendship and things like that.
Just wanted to cover a couple of things, a little bit more my perspective. In the Clifton Strengths model is, according to their research, they found that if you focus only on growing your weaknesses, that you get between 40 and 60% growth in that space. If you focus on your strengths, it's between 400 and 600% growth in that space. So in many ways, it's this idea of efficiency is, are you going to get the gains you're going to put into it? But I also wanted to clarify too, is that when they talk about strengths, it's actually the combination of, are you skilled at it? So you put time in order to build a skill, as well as are you passionate about it? That if you're actually both, you're in an area of strength. Otherwise, you've actually got a skill, but you don't love it, or you love it, but you're not skilled, or you're in neither, that it's not an area of passion or this area of strength. And this lower left-hand box is really where a lot of our things are, is that we're not skilled at it and we're not passionate about it. But finding this space where we are both skilled, we've built up time and effort and resources in order to get skilled at it, and we're passionate about it, is this area of strength that we're talking about. Now, when we're talking about delegation, number one thing, delegation is not abdication. Delegation is not, this is now all your fault and it's on your plate and I'm done with it. It is more so of, this is what I need to do. And if I'm going to delegate it, there needs to be an agreement in place of what the finish line looks like. So then I'm not still, that program is running in my head, where we can get to this idea of overwhelm. It's still running in my head because I still need to see it through to the end. However, I've also delegated some of the lift to someone who's strong in that area, and being really clear of what the finish line looks like, and in communication with that person, where it's not just about how are they serving me, but if I'm going to delegate to this to someone because it's an area of strength, it's also something that's going to serve them, and they need to have some skin in the game, so that then there is a desire and a passion and a drive for them to complete it as well. It's the sign of a great leader when you can delegate to somebody in this vision casting, like we talked about earlier, is this is what I'm looking to work with. Can you work with me to build this? Not, here's your busy work to do because I can't be bothered with the busy work. That's not what delegation is about.
In delegation as well, it's not pressuring the person. Have you done it? Is anything wrong? This is wrong. This is not the way I want it. This is not good. This refrains the person, takes all the creativity and actually makes the person do the minimum that they need to do in order to go by. And delegation is creating the structure, providing the structure for the person to do what they do best, what they want to do in a joyful way. So sometimes I have been a consultant to a marketing consultant to companies, and I got there and the person, the owner of the company, had a designer that was doing social media, and the whole conversation was on WhatsApp. And so she would say, hey, we need to do this, and it would be something for the next week or another week. And then there would be a lot of conversations, and then she would request a new work. And then there would be conversations, and then she would send the media. And then that designer that would do that work 3, 4, 5 days later, 5 days later had to look throughout that conversation and see what exactly do I have to do? What was the thing that she told me to do before she sent the media, before she said to do that other thing? And then we talked about there is 20 random messages in the middle of the things. It's not the proper means of communication. So that designer was overwhelmed. And when I got there, one of the first things I did was to present them to Trello. We use Trello, which is a Kanban board. And you can use Trello just using Trello. It's just, oh, use Trello. It will be a board. But if we actually learn the Kanban methodology, there is a methodology which has some principles and common good practices that we learn. It's about 5 principles and 6 good practice, something like that, that we learn. Then we can apply that methodology to actually greatly increase our productivity and communicate with teams much better. So I introduced her to Trello, I introduced her to Kanban, and then I introduced the team, and I presented, this is the system that we are going to use. Everybody on the team has access to it. Who creates the idea? That person creates the idea of the post. So you are responsible to putting ideas here. And who does the description? That person does the description. So when you get to work, you will open this board on your computer and you will see there will be like 10 ideas. You work on 2 ideas today. So you get 2 ideas there and you create your descriptions. And then the designer will come now and to create the visual communication, and they will get to an environment where everything they need is there and they have right in front of their face what is the next work that they have to do. And that designer, Michael, she thanked me so much. She was so grateful. Her life changed because now she didn't have to go on WhatsApp. It was all in a stressful situation. And then other people on the team that didn't have contact with me, they enter in contact with me to say, hey, I know that you haven't done too much yet, but what you did so far was very good. Thank you. The guy that created the descriptions sent me this message. It's because there are tools and methodologies we can use. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed because we didn't take the time to have the attention. Again, we are neglecting what we can do. We are neglecting that we can improve, that we can grow, that there are people in the world that have dealt with that situation and they have learned better, and that this information is out there. And if we look for it, we might find it. It doesn't mean that we'll find everything that we look for, but I guarantee you, with the amount of content that is being created today, we live in a blessed era. And there is a big chance of whatever you are facing, struggling, having challenges with, we might find it online.
This idea of having the right tools and the right system in place, I think, is really important. And it's this idea of every tool that you use out there is specialized for a particular outcome. And using WhatsApp or Telegram or Skype or Instant Messenger to actually define what the terms of a project are works, but not very well. This idea, like I said, when there's an agreement about what the project looks like, it's easier when all of those pieces are in the same place. If it's Trello and a Kanban board, if it's using Notion, one of our favorite tools, if it's actually using Teams in a way where you have a place to collect all the information so that a person can get to what is their genius, their strength, is really helpful to reduce that amount of overwhelm so you don't have to sift through all the rest of the noise. And there's so many digital tools out there and so many different ways to communicate. It's a matter of, in some ways, setting up your personal standard operating procedure for each of those tools. As an example, for a long time, I was on Skype. I don't use it anymore because there isn't any communication there for me to do at this point. But I do use Telegram. I do use WhatsApp. And I've got different communities on each of those. But we don't actually organize this podcast out of Telegram because it's not the right tool for that job. Same thing, and there's at least one YouTube video I've seen out there that talks about stop sending email. Stop actually using email to communicate all the information that you do, because that is a conversation. It's to send information from one place to another. It's not a good place to collect information together in a single place. So that's why, personally, for me, I love using Notion, because I've got all of my ideas about that project in one place. If there's images, if there's text, if there's links to a video, if there's a book, things like that, I can then organize all those pieces in one place to get that. So it actually reduces the overwhelm for me. But I've also showed people my dashboard that I work with, and wow, that's so overwhelming. There's no way I could do that, because it's a different interface. Like when we talked about the Life User Interface a few weeks ago, it's much the same way. It's a matter of finding the right interface for you to reduce your overwhelm. For me, it's a matter of, I work well with data. I'm learning to actually work better with the emotions attached to the data. That's where I can sometimes get overwhelmed. It's a matter of finding the right systems that support that, and really having a management system for you to organize what you're doing in your life. So me personally, I actually use Lifebook to know where I want to go. I use that as my goal planning system, my project management for my life, the map and directions for where I'm looking to go. And it really helps me, once you've actually got that vision written out, to then break it down into smaller pieces. because I know that I will not get to that 5-year goal by waving a magic wand. I can't travel 1,000 miles in the blink of an eye. I'm not skilled at that, but I can take it one step at a time. So having a system that allows you to do that is really important for me, so that I can actually make the progress that I do in my business, in my love relationship, in my quality of life, in my intellectual and emotional and health aspects of my life. Is I know where I want to go, break it down into smaller pieces, and then execute on those pieces one at a time. Because I've laid them out, I've written them down, I've vetted them, I've reorganized them to make them work for where I want to go. That's it. To me, it's a game changer. I'm trying to think back even 4 or 5 years ago, before I had Lifebook as part of my life operating system, before I was using Notion to actually store this information in. My life is completely different now in a way that I'm really excited about, because I know where all my information is, rather than having to, go look through a pile of papers or try to find a journal or a book somewhere. That I've actually got all that stuff in a centralized place that works the way that my mind works, because I built it the way that my mind works. So that, at least for me, is how I've been able to overcome overwhelm, is by organizing it and then breaking down the smaller pieces.
And when we don't feel overwhelmed, we feel in control. When we have our information organized, we have a system, we trust the system, we know that things are moving in the right direction, we feel this excitement that Michael was talking about for our future. And it's compelling us to move towards it. And this comes from the clarity. Not only the clarity of knowing that we are building something brick by brick every day, clarity of knowing where we are going, what this something is, and also the clarity of knowing what is the action that we need to do today. And if we do that today, we are okay. We have our day for ourselves. We can relax and enjoy time, enjoy our experience here, because we are not overwhelmed with a reality that we are not actually satisfied right now, because we always want to grow. We are never satisfied, particularly when things are not the way we want to. So we don't feel overwhelmed by that, by this feeling of I don't know where to go, and just following our base decisions, our base choices. And we are satisfied. And it's easier to do things like getting to know at the end of our day, have we done our best? Because if we make this question to the average person in society, they might feel overwhelmed, they might get upset, they might isolate themselves from you. What a hard question. But when we make this same question, have you done your best today, to someone that knows, has a vision for the future, they have a system they are following, they are building things continuously, like they understand the compound effect, and they understand that today they are taking one action that is part of a bigger thing that will build something in the future. And they are in this cycle of celebration where being accountable and celebrating, that is feeding them. Then it's easy to make questions, have you done your best today? Because even if we don't, we understand, oh, but it's just today. It was just a day. But consistently, I have done my best. I did what I needed to do. And when we know exactly what needs to be done, what screw to turn, then it's not so difficult. It's difficult to get a machinery that is broken together if we don't know which screws to turn. But when we understand what are the screws to turn, sometimes it's just one screw that we need to go there and, oh, it was loose. And then it works.
Thank you, Bruno, for that. So I want to wrap up here. Now, I'm not going to ask you to subscribe. I'm not going to ask you to, what I am going to ask you to do is comment down below when you felt overwhelmed. What did you do about it? What do your systems look like in order to prepare you for the next time you may come up against that situation, so that you are either less overwhelmed or are not overwhelmed at all? I want to learn what your tools are too. We've shared with you what our tools are, but I really want to know what you are succeeding in, where you're struggling, where you are moving beyond that limitation that you may have set for yourself, and how this works for you. I'm always a student, always of learning new ways of doing things. And I'd love to know what you are doing around Overwhelm for you. And with that, I'm going to say, have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening. In one of the groups that I'm in, they say happy time zone, just depending on where you are in this world when you're watching this. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, evening, week, and we will talk to you next week. My name is Michael Danklefs of Elevate Your Best.
And I'm Bruno Martins. And it was great to speak with you, Michael. Great to speak with you in the audience as well. Bye-bye. We see you next week. Happy time zone.
Awesome. See you next week. Bye now.